Oh man, we got a great Big Friday show for you. We should just call this show the Great Big Friday Show. Second hour, Tim Staples is going to be here, and we're going to do open forum for kids. So if you're under 18 and you've got a question about the faith, second hour is for you. You just got to get permission to dial the phone. Then you got to find a phone and then call us, and we'll do our very best to get you an answer to questions about God, about faith, about the sacraments. It's always fun to end the work week with an hour with kids on Kids Open Forum. In the first hour, we welcome back a good friend of this program and someone who I'm always just delighted to talk to, but I am particularly delighted to talk to him today because he's got a book out that is the book of the moment. It is some great coming together of providence has happened, and he has the book that we need at this moment. It's called Restoring Humanity, Essays on the Evangelization of Culture. And if you've ever thought, I'm not so sure humanity needs restoring, you have probably been disabused of that notion in recent months. And I can tell you what you will get in this book is not just a reaction. It's not a reaction book to this or that movement or this or that passion that's being expressed, or even this or that act of emphasis in the media or pop culture or whatnot. Not at all. This is a book of a lifetime of work, really, reflecting on Christianity, on culture, on what makes us human and what robs us of our humanity. And our guest is Jared Stout. He's as I said, the brand new book is called Restoring Humanity: Essays on the Evangelization of Culture. He's the associate superintendent of Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Denver, and he teaches there in Denver at the Augustine Institute. Jared Stout, thank you for being with us for this hour.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And congratulations on having a book that meets the moment so precisely.
And God's providence, right?
Amen. That's right, in God's providence. But it's funny that I do think this is a lifetime of reflection for you, is in this book. And so in a certain sense, your interest in the fact that humanity is sort of slipping away from us is now at the service of humanity in the publishing of this book. What is your sense? First of all, why restoring humanity? And to your mind, what needs to be restored so that our humanity is restored?
Mm-hmm. In the modern world, we hear people telling us that if we pull away from the church and from faith and from God, then we can be truly free. We can be truly in control of our own lives, and we're going to have all of this material progress in the world. But we've actually seen the opposite happening. The more we turn away from God and faith, the more that our own humanity is undermined. Reason is not better off than it was 100 years ago. Right? We're really having a breakdown of reason.
Yep.
And when we look at the natural world, we even look at our own bodies, right? The integrity of human life is being called into question and undermined in so many ways right now.
And so you have I'm stealing this a little bit as a paraphrase from one of the chapters in your book, but this tremendous material prosperity gives the impression of a vital society, a culture that's alive and on the move. But we're really, in fact, dying as a culture.
We are running on the fumes of Christian culture. And it really is Christian culture that even gave rise to science. When you think about the ability of reason to understand the world and to be co-creators with God, this is what brought material progress. But I think because we're running on fumes, we are going to get to the point where we start seeing things breaking down more and more in our culture. And as you said, we can kind of look around at this moment and say, things are not right at this moment.
Right, yeah.
And especially with the family. The church has always said that the family is the building block of society. And when we look at what's going on in our culture with the breakdown of the family, and to me, this is most disturbing, young people not wanting to have a family.
Right.
To me, this is the biggest sign that things are not right in our culture.
Our number, by the way, is 888-318-7884. If you'd like to talk with our guest this hour, Jared. If you don't, I'm going to, because I love talking with Jared. But you're welcome to call. The book is called Restoring Humanity. Jared Stout, a teacher, come to admire the Augustine Institute. Extraordinary place, extraordinary people, and Jared fits in perfectly among them. 888-318-7884, the number, 888-318-7884. I was reading a piece about the Hagia Sophia being turned from a museum back into a mosque. And there's a commentary that came from the UNESCO, the United Nations World Heritage Organization, and because it's a World Heritage Site, the Hagia Sophia. It's a Catholic church. It's been a Catholic church for more than 1,000 years. And then in 1453, it's lost to Mehmet in the Muslim invasion. It becomes a mosque for hundreds of years. In the 1930s, it's made into a museum, and everyone seems to think it should go back to being a museum. And especially the UNESCO World Site. And there's this great upset that Muslims will be praying there again. But the UNESCO statement says, this belongs in the hands of all humanity. And as a museum, it's preserved universally for everyone. And that seems to me that is exactly pointing to the wrong way of thinking about what is universally good for humanity. We've given up the idea that the universal good for humanity is the Catholic faith that built that church. We want to put that faith into a museum and say that secularism and whatever is secular is the real guarantor of the future of humanity. What do you make of my thesis?
Yeah, one of my chapters in the book, it's a question: will beauty save the world? And that phrase, beauty will save the world, is from Dostoevsky's novel, The Idiot. And the idiot and the prince in the story never actually says it. It's attributed to him. And he, of course, ends the novel in an epileptic fit. And so it doesn't actually seem like there's a lot of saving going on in the novel. And to me, that's key. Beauty will not save the world if it's simply a museum piece.
Yeah.
Just like walking through the Met is not going to save souls.
Right.
However, we do have a huge problem of illiteracy of our own tradition, the beauty, the truth, the goodness of our own tradition. And so, one of my biggest concerns with Hagia Sophia is that we would lose contact with one of the most beautiful sites on the face of the earth.
Okay, I see.
And so it's important that we still have access, and the Turkish government said we will. But it's interesting. There's an Orthodox bishop that said, well, if Muslims are going to pray there again, can Christians pray there again? Yeah. That's an interesting way of looking at it, because
a better way.
Yeah, exactly. When you look at the icons of Christ and Our Lady within the building, they are still pointing us to Christ, the beauty of Christ that will save us. And I think that's what Dostoevsky is really getting at, that beauty can save us, suffering can save us as well, when they are leading us into Christ. Yeah. And I think that's the enduring witness of Hagia Sophia. As a museum or as a place of worship, it can lead us into an encounter with Christ.
Again, 888-318-7884, the number. The thing is, it can't be done, this restoring of humanity, making the world a humane place where a human being can come to the fullness of their humanity, can't be done in a fully 100% secularized world. Those two things are opposites to one another. They clash with one another.
Central to the book is really the vision of Pope John Paul II. He realized, growing up in Poland, a country that had been partitioned and had rediscovered its identity after the First World War as a nation, and then, of course, taken over by the Nazis and the communists. John Paul realized that culture was the way to save his own nation. And I think, part of what I'm arguing in the book, it's the way to save the church and our society as well, because it's the way that we live. And so John Paul said that if there's a wedge between faith and life, then there's a problem with both faith and life, right? Because they're meant to be drawn together. So for faith, he said, to actually be faithful to itself, to be complete, it needs to be lived out as a culture. But yes, culture isn't fine without faith either, right? Because culture needs to be pointed in the right direction. It needs to be healed. It needs to be elevated to really be a complete and full way of life. So faith and culture need each other. And that's essentially the thesis of the book. But it's from Pope John Paul II, and there's a whole chapter on his thought, placing culture as the priority of the new evangelization, as he described it.
The book is called Restoring Humanity, Essays on the Evangelization of Culture. I think most people who go through a I don't know, say the average airport or whatnot can get a sense of how humanity has slipped away, that these great public places are really places not for human beings. They're for consumers more than anything. And we are so much more than consumers. So I suppose that the where I'm going with that is that there is something in us, I think, that has been taught that if the whole world would just become peaceful and secular like we are, then that would be much better than all of this religion everywhere causing conflict and all of that. That I just want to come at you again with this. That underlying assumption that secularism is pacifying and humanizing is wrong.
Absolutely. Tom Holland is a secular historian, British historian, who actually just came out very recently and said, I realized that the values that I cherish are not from secular liberalism. They're all from Christianity.
Yeah.
When you look at the ancient world, those values were not there. If you look around at other cultures of the world, those same values are not there. They are Christian values that we cherish. And obviously, when you look at ideological movements, Nazism was a secular movement. Communism, like the communism that killed tens of millions of people in Russia, tens of millions of people in China, and has people in concentration camps in China right now, that's a secular vision, right? And so it really has to be Christians that are once again standing up for the dignity of the human person. But I would also add a dignified way of life. That's what we really need. A life that is worth living, that has meaning, and really is full of hope. And I hope that the book really is able to communicate that. Can we have contact with beauty, with an organic contact with nature, even through our work? Can we build a robust family life? Can we build strong schools? These are ways in which we can rebuild hope and confidence in the dignity and beauty of human life.
And so I suppose there's an agenda that comes with that it says it's not enough just to say we need to. It's certainly necessary, but it's not sufficient to say we need to have our religious freedoms protected. We need to have a space that we can go to somewhere in the secular culture. It's the agenda is something much greater than that, much nobler than just trying to eke out a spot where you can be left alone to be a Christian. I have to take a break. When we come back, I want you to tell me, if you can, what that greater agenda is and why it's not enough just to say, I want to be a voter and I want to have a place to go to church. We need the Christian is about something much more important as we lack so much humanity. Right back after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
People often wonder about the power of prayer. Why do we pray anyway if we end up having to do so much work for ourselves? So the reality is, when we find ourselves up against a wall and we pray, it's like God turns a light up on the other side of that wall. Brighter and brighter and brighter until the light shines through the tiniest cracks. God might not do it all for me, but He shows me how to make my work more efficient so that together we can accomplish all things through His grace.
I hope that I'm not tamping down my enthusiasm for the brand new book from our guest. I hope I'm not in any way suggesting that I might lack enthusiasm for it. I honestly believe that sometimes a book matches the moment just perfectly. I do think that this book does. I worry sometimes that you can, in the modern world, there's so many entertainments and things to turn to that you can be anesthetized to the fact that the society is not really humane and doesn't really provide all the things, as Jared Stout, the author of the book Restoring Humanity, says, like including dignity and meaning in order to make a life fully human. So I was asking you before the break, and so now you've had time to think about it. This better be a really good answer about there's a certain way in which we can get sucked into a minimalist position of, hey, don't trample on my right of free worship, and don't trample on my religious liberties. But it's not just that we want to be at liberty in a secular world. We want something else, and that's what you're trying to get at in this book, I think.
Yeah, there's a reason that John Paul II made building culture a priority of the new evangelization, because he's saying it's not enough, as you're saying, just to have these rights off in our corner. We have to live out our faith in this secular world. And I think this living out of the faith is the way that we will rebuild culture. So how do we do that? We already talked about kind of immersing ourselves in beauty and having this order towards Christ. But, just kind of looking at the rest of the chapters, that kind of lays out a plan or a vision for rebuilding culture. One is engaging nature in an organic way through our work, that we are meant to be co-creators with God, that he's given us a mission of dominion over the earth. And I think we're lacking that in our artificial modern culture, right? So the whole vocation to work is a vocation to be in contact with nature and to perfect it. The chapter on family may be the most important, because I think this is the key way. Some people say, what can we do with this, secular culture that it surrounds us? There's nothing I can do to combat it. And I say, well, the first thing you do is you live the faith every single day. And I think the home is the main place to build culture with the support of the parish, right? And so that's praying as a family in the home and having the faith become part of our daily, weekly, and even yearly routine. And then really forming the mind and imagination of our children, having a routine of work and leisure in the home, and then building community with other families. But then also having the support of schools and having the school and the university become a place of rebuilding Christian culture. I like to say we want to reconnect past and present. We want to reconnect faith and reason, and we want to reconnect faith and life. We're building these habits of Christian culture in the school as well. And I think when we do this through our work, through our family life, through education, through beauty and the great tradition of the church, then we can start to say, how is then my life, which is ordered and guided by my faith, building up society as a whole? It really is, Christians who are robustly living their faith in relationship with Christ every day and everything that they do, that will really be a leaven for our society as a whole.
Jared Stout is our guest. Our number is 888-318-7884. If you'd like to call and talk with Jared Stout, he is the Associate Superintendent of Catholic Schools in the Archdiocese of Denver, and he teaches at the Augustine Institute, and he's got a whole bunch of books, including you wrote a book about beer, I remember. Tell me the title of the beer book again.
The beer option, right?
Oh, yeah, the beer option.
The Benedictine tradition. Yeah. So
did you ever send a copy to Rod Dreher? Did he get a copy?
Yeah, right. And just how beer can be a way of rebuilding culture.
Yeah.
Right, with local community and evangelization and reconnecting to the Catholic tradition, right? So that's another facet of this.
The current book is called Restoring Humanity, and it comes just at a moment where we really need to be doing a deep reflection on how to restore humanity. If you have questions about that, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Is there anything in the book about Christians, the divisions among Christians, and a need to have a more unified witness to a different vision of life than secular culture is giving us?
I don't address that particularly, but I will say I don't think there's anything in the book that we couldn't use to engage with our fellow Christians. A lot of these same principles, would apply, of trying to really live out the faith in our daily life, to engage beauty and education, and to work for the common good together with all people of goodwill. So I think the closest thing is that the chapter on John Paul II originally was in a journal that was meant to promote dialogue amongst Christians, and it had a very good reception, even amongst non-Catholics.
So I suppose some people, we mentioned an allusion there to Rod Dreher, who wrote the Benedict option, and whatever else might be said about the Benedict option, and many, many things have been said about that book, the idea that Christians built culture once and we can do it again permeates that book. Whatever you might think of the strategy, but it permeates the book. Do you believe that are you of a mind that Christians actually built what might be called Western culture, and that as we see it kind of losing steam and breaking down all around us, that we can do it again?
Absolutely. And I think that's even the thesis of the book. We can build culture because culture is our shared way of life. And Christian culture is a shared way of life that's animated by our faith. And so, yes, I do absolutely believe that the Benedictine monks and bishops throughout the West were key in rebuilding culture. You can see that in very concrete ways. The first hospitals in the West, the libraries, the way that universities arose out of the monastery and cathedral schools, the way that bishops were instrumental in compiling legal codes. And we could go on and on and on. So I think there's very concrete ways in which we saw the church rebuilding culture in the West. And, the premise of the Benedict option is that as at least morally and spiritually speaking, the West is crumbling again, we really need to reanimate our culture with the Christian faith again and start rebuilding these institutions.
Is that why the word evangelizing is right there in the subtitle, that you associate the restoration of humanity with sharing Christ with humanity?
Right. And John Paul was clear. He said, not only do individuals need evangelizing, that is to receive the good news, he said culture is an object of evangelization. So he was very clear about that. And that is bringing the gospel, the vision of Christ into the culture and how we live.
In a practical sense, I mean, whenever it always happens, if we do an hour here on evangelization, we'll get people calling saying, I just don't have it in me to go out on a street corner and stand there and share Jesus and that kind of thing. And that's not, I mean, that is a great thing to do, and many wonderful people are doing that, but that's not exactly the whole universe of things that you have in mind when you use the word evangelizing.
Right. And I think that the evangelization of culture is something that parents should pass on to their kids. That is, I'm not only teaching them the faith, I am teaching them how to live as a Christian. Schools become places of the evangelization of culture. Once again, how do we think as Christians in the world? How do we view everything within a coherent unity? How do we live as Christians in the world? I think schools really teach us that. If you are at a secular school that is keeping the faith off to the side or completely out of the school, then you're basically learning to think and live in a secular way. And then also through our work, right? We have great opportunities to evangelize in so many ways, just the witness of our work, the integrity of our work, the relationships that we form. And I think even through our leisure, the kind of conversations that we have, the time that we spend with people. And so there are huge opportunities for witness right now. But if we live our faith, the witness will follow. People will see how we're living, and the engagement will be natural.
The thing is, though, I think every person listening, let's say, is like some of the young families we have here at Catholic Answers. They really do feel overwhelmed morning to night. There's not the kind of individualism that the United States has embraced has made family life really burdensome for many people. They feel overwhelmed. How are they going? They're saying, now, Jared, I got to build culture. I got to evangelize the world. I mean, I can barely get through the schedule that I have with these kids.
And I think that when we are really participating in a school that has a strong vision, right, we're partnering with that school. And I think the same thing, with parishes. Parishes spend a lot of time having educational programs for youth, or they do adult Bible studies. But one thing that I think we really could do to help families to build culture is to have communities of families where families can really come together and support one another within the parish. I think that would actually make the parish a place of building culture. That is, it can become a place where we're sharing the Christian life together. And it's not that we're just going to Mass. I mean, the Mass is the center of Christian culture. There's no doubt about it. But I think what we really need to see is that there needs to be a way of life, habits and practices growing up around the Mass and around religious education.
Jared Stout is our guest. Restoring Humanity is the name of the book. I have said it before. I'll say it again. I think it's the book we need at this moment. And I have kept callers waiting, so we'll get to callers for Jared Stout right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
You're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Many Catholics ignore the Bible. They say they have the church instead. But we should embrace sacred scripture, not just as the revealed Word of God, but as a Catholic work, intimately connected with the church from the earliest centuries. In The Bible is a Catholic Book, apologist Jimmy Akin shows how the Bible cannot exist apart from the church, in its origins, in the truths it contains, in its careful preservation over the centuries. Scripture is inseparable from the Catholic faith. This is fitting, since both come from God for our salvation. If you're a Catholic who sometimes gets intimidated by the Bible is a Catholic Book will help you better understand and take pride in this gift that God gave the world through the Church. After all, Catholics are the original Bible Christians. Order your copy of The Bible is a Catholic Book today by calling 1-844-239-4952, visiting shop.catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
In what forms does the Word of God come to us? How do we know that the Bible is inspired, inerrant, and complete? Why do we need tradition to help us understand Scripture? Doesn't the Bible teach that it alone is sufficient for salvation? In 20 Answers, Scripture and Tradition, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, examining the first and most important issue in the Christian faith, the manner in which God has communicated to us the saving truths of the gospel. 20 Answers, Scripture and Tradition is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
I'm Gloria Purvis.
I'm Monsignor Charles Pope.
And I'm Deacon Harold. The Morning Glory team discusses COVID precautions at Mass.
Monday morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
It's a really big Friday. It feels like a super big Friday. I'll tell you why. The next hour, we've got Tim Staples, and we're going to do open forum for kids. So if you're under 18 and you want to call and you got permission to dial the phone, the next hour, we just let any kid call with any question at all. This hour, we have Jared Stout from the Augustine Institute in Denver with his brand new book, Restoring Humanity. You can call and talk with him, 888-318-7884. But I also want to let people know that Tim and I are doing an evening with Evangelization Australia this evening, and it's online. And the folks at Evangelization Australia have invited anybody around the world who wants to come. So if you just type in Evangelization Australia into your search bar, you'll find them, and you can find out where to go. Or you can go to the Catholic Answers Facebook page and join us this evening. And I say this evening. In Australia, it will actually be morning. It'll be Saturday morning there, but it's Friday evening here with Tim and I. By the way, the Australians, for whatever reason, spell evangelization with an S. I don't know if they think they're British or what the deal is, but they spell it with an S. So Evangelization Australia. Or just go to our Facebook page, Catholic Answers, and check it out there. We're going to talk about God the Father. You know what? You don't hear enough about God the Father, do you? but you pray to him every day, because I know you're praying your Our Father. So we'll talk about that with all the folks from Australia, and we'd love to have you join us. And I know the folks in Australia would love to have you join us as well. Again, the number right here is 888-318-7884. Calls for Jared Stout. So I'm going to go to Rosa in Dallas, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Rosa, your question for our guest, Jared Stout.
Hi, Dr. Stout. I took your class last fall with Dr. G at AI and loved it, and I'm doing it again now with Dr. Klein. I was wondering, this book sounds fascinating. It would be like a feather in my cap if you offered this class at AI, do you?
Yeah, so actually, a lot of the ideas in the book have come out of my teaching. I developed a class at the Augustine Institute called The New Evangelization and Culture, and taught it for years when I was a full-time professor there. And really was an amazing class, and we got into art and society and living the faith. That has been taught. I'm no longer a full-time professor there, but Joseph Pierce even did it last summer. So in the Creed class that I'm doing at the Augustine Institute this fall, as we are looking at the Creed, we are going to be making connections to prayer and to art every single week of the class. So we will see elements of this coming out. But actually, I was going to be doing a class at a local parish here in Denver called Icon, an exploration of Christian art and culture. But because of COVID, you can say, well, it's unfortunate we can't do it in person. But on the other hand, now anyone across the country can take this course. And we are going to be getting really deep into the history of Christian art and all different media. So architecture, painting, sculpture, music, literature. It's going to be a 30-week course. Really looking forward to it. If you're interested in signing up for this class, Icon, you go to the Denver Catholic Biblical School and you click under supplemental courses, and you can sign up for the course online.
Okay, Rosa?
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Especially, I think Dr. Stout appreciates it too, because he just got to share his course coming up. That does sound like a good course. The number here is 888-318-7884. Let's go to John in Denver, listening on 1060 AM. So you're right there where Dr. Stout is. John, your question.
Yeah, I'm going to be 88 in October, so I'm an old man. And I remember when America was Christian. I remember when stores were closed on Sunday. It was called the Blue Law. Bars and liquor stores were closed on Good Friday, Holy Thursday, Good Friday. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Good Friday. Right.
And we used to swear on a Bible. And now they're teaching evolution, and I'm saying I think we lost it in America. And I took a biblical course. Is there a fellow by name Campbell teaching a course there?
Yes, he's a good friend of mine, Daniel Campbell. Yeah.
Daniel Campbell, yeah. A fabulous course. And look, when I took that course, I said, this young man should be giving this course to all the local priests in Denver. I was like, he was awesome. Yeah.
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate that. I mean, here you have a gentleman, 88 years old. I'm a little bit younger than that. But I can remember when things were closed on Sunday. I'm sure that even before I was born, some of that had already started going away. But how do we get that back, I guess, is what John in Denver is asking.
Yeah, it's an important question, because I think part of the problem we're experiencing in the church right now is that we used to be able to rely on the culture to support living out the Christian life. And I think as we see when we look at the collapse of the last 60 years is that if you're simply relying on the culture, that's not enough, right? And so building Christian culture has to come from an encounter with Christ, faith in Christ, and a daily relationship with Christ. That is the beginning. And then from there, it is about forming daily habits of living out my faith and how this enters into my work, my relationships, everything that I do. And so I would say that it really is from my experience teaching on culture with a lot of parish workers, with school teachers. I think we have to say, how can we right now in our situation begin rebuilding Christian culture. It's not going to be me necessarily, lobbying Washington to change laws to go back to keeping everything closed on Sunday. Would it be better if we were observing the Lord's Day publicly? Yes. But I think that what we need to do is to begin to say, let's look long term. In the short term, we're not going to automatically just change the way that everyone lives in our country. But I need to change the way that I live right now. I can't wait around for the culture to change. And I need to really be consistent about my faith. And also, this is something we haven't talked about yet, but making sure that I'm removing the obstacles to living out of my faith. I think there's more and more obstacles in education. There can be obstacles through entertainment and maybe the dominance of technology over my life. There can be obstacles. The way that I'm thinking, right, can be incompatible with my faith. So I need consistency in everything that I do with the center of my relationship with Christ.
John, thank you so much for that question. The number is 888-318-7884. Jared Stout is our guest. He's the author of a brand new book called Restoring Humanity. It's essays on the evangelization of culture, available right now. And up next, we go to Jackie in North Dakota, listening on Real Presence Radio. Hi, Jackie. You got a question for Jared Stout?
Hello. Thanks so much for taking my call.
Happy to.
I'm actually really enjoying this discussion. My question for Dr. Stout, my husband just interrupted me. He said I should wish Maria a happy wedding. Congratulations.
Okay. All right. I'll explain that to Dr. Stout why you did that. But thank you for that. Marie is she's getting married tomorrow, so she's not in today. But assistant producer Marie, they get to go to the church. Even, I guess it's open, so they're going to get married tomorrow. And Jackie, you have to hang on the line. You have to. Your husband knows this. Okay. You have to hang on the line after this call. But go ahead with your question for Dr. Stout.
Thank you. Well, my question for Dr. Stout is earlier on when you were introducing his book, he talked about one way of this renewal happening being with kind of intergenerational ministry within the parish, but maybe more so grassroots up. And as a family with 4 young children who really love the Benedictine spirituality, my husband and I were just wondering if he could give us some practical ideas of how a family might invite other people from the parish along and do this journey together. Like, what would that tangibly look like?
Beautiful.
It is beautiful. I think it would be one of the most important takeaways from this conversation. If we could get families starting family holy hours. It doesn't have to be a whole hour, right? But it's a time for families to come in church where they're not telling their kids, shh, be quiet. Don't say that. Sit still in the pew, right? Where maybe you can have adoration where each family comes up and has a time just for their family to come right in front of the monstrance. We've done something where we've asked families to write down petitions and even put them in a basket right in front of the monstrance and maybe have some songs and hymns that the kids would really like to sing and make it family focused. Then maybe you go and you have potluck dinner, you have time for games, and then there's certain times you may be able to take a hike as a family, go on a camping trip. I think we really need to look at parish ministry and find ways to make it more family focused, because it's hard. If you say, join this Bible study for adults and you have 4 young kids, it's hard to then get a babysitter or take turns with your spouse or just dropping the kids off for education. What happens when you do that? Well, you're disconnecting their faith formation from your role as the primary educator. There's nothing wrong with that. But we, in addition, need opportunities for parents to be the main mentors of their kids in an organic way, that we are living this out together. We're doing things together. And when you do it with other families, you're building culture, right? You're building these habits, and it's not just your family being weird, right? But you're doing with other families, making friendships, having it be something normal for your kids.
How's that, Jackie? What do you think?
That was really helpful. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, and God bless you in your efforts. It really is a very beautiful and inspiring call. We're going to send you a free book, so hang on, and Thomas will get your information, and you can negotiate with Thomas about which book it is. It's basically any book from Catholic Answers. She can have any book she wants. But tell her don't get Things the Saints Never Said. Just get a good book, okay? 888-318-7884 is our number. 888-318-7884 if you'd like to talk with Jared Stout about Restoring Humanity, Essays on the Evangelization of Culture. I would strongly suggest you just find the book and get it. It's a very reasonable, I think it's 9 essays, right? And you can read them at your leisure, but very helpful in diagnosing, and we haven't talked so much about this, but diagnosing what happened that got us to this point, and then giving some helpful ideas, all in the spirit of Pope John Paul II, the ideas on how we can become the people who grow in an organic sense, in a sense that makes us partners with Jesus, who loves every single human being and wants every life to flourish, in creating a truly human culture in which truly human lives can flourish. I think it's fair to say that it's not unique to Catholics, but Catholics are probably more formed in this direction than almost anyone else, that you can't be a fully human person. You can't live a fully human life on your own. It's a thing that's done in a community, in a society, within a culture. And so in order to restore humanity, we need to restore all those things. Your calls are welcome. 888-318-7884. We'll take a quick break and be right back with more with our guest, Jared Stout.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
St. Hildegard of Bingen was a mystic, an abbess, a botanist, a saint, and a doctor of the Church.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
Hildegard had her first visions at the age of 3, which she called the shade of the living light. She later wrote about them in works declared by St. Bernard of Clairvaux to be from God. Pope Benedict XVI agreed when he named her only one of 4 doctors of the Church who are women in 2012.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. The book that I've been recommending to you, and I hope that you will share, is called Restoring Humanity. It's from our guest, Jared Stout, who teaches at I don't know why I'm having trouble with that, but who teaches at the Augustine Institute, or people just call it AI. Those are the people who are very fancy and really in the know, but you could call it Augustine Institute. They're in Denver, and they do fine work. And so we're taking your questions on restoring humanity, restoring this culture of ours. And Jared, I asked you, before I go back to the phone calls, I will ask you again. I just don't want to leave that hanging, about how do we get here? What got us into this predicament we are currently in?
Yeah, really. I mean, it goes back to the 1600s, to the project of the Enlightenment, and we can make connections even back to the Reformation, the separation of faith and culture that you see even in Martin Luther and other reformers. But from the 1600s on, there is a reimagining of human life that happens in this secular way. Kind of propping up reason as the ultimate goal, even if that breaks down over time, but reimagining economics, reimagining politics, and even reimagining the family from a secular point of view. And I would say that what I'm trying to do in the book is to help people to reimagine from a Christian point of view. What should my work look like if I'm truly living the faith in my daily life? What should my family life look like? What should a school look like? And what should our society eventually look like when all of these pieces fit together over time? And so a lot of it has to do with the imagination. Can I really picture a life in which we are drawing upon the great heritage of our Catholic faith and Catholic culture in rebuilding in a new and dynamic way for the future.
And this is something I think this is maybe part of why you see so many Catholic people write books about Tolkien, is that he understood this question of imagination and the ability to imagine life differently than it's being sold to you, really, in the modern world.
And I think that that's a great example because, as he said, he was writing myth. It was basically interweaving the Catholic vision into the story in a natural way. So in no way seemed contrived or forced.
Right.
And so I think he can be a model for saying, how do we really reimagine Christian life right now in a faithful, but also in a creative way?
Let's go to Barbara in New Jersey, listening to EWTN on channel 130, a Sirius XM satellite radio. Barbara in New Jersey, are you there with us?
Yes.
Hi, Barbara. Your question for Jared Stout.
Well, I guess I'm a 55-year-old lifelong Catholic. I went K through 8 to a wonderful Catholic school in upstate New York that's still flourishing, and then an all-girls Catholic high school, wonderful. And then I went to a Jesuit college that is really it's a great college, but boy, are they! I feel like social justice has become their god. It's
so you got, in other words, you got a lot of Catholic education, and then you went to a Jesuit college. Okay, so we. Sorry, that was a Jesuit joke, but go ahead, continue with your question.
Yes, well, my faith, praise the Lord, because it's from God, right? Mine stayed strong, but like I remember going into, say confession, and the things, smelling the alcohol and just the disdain as you're pouring your heart out was pretty sad. But in any event, my question is, I have about 32. I started doing BSF, Bible Study Fellowship. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's one of the biggest, oldest Bible studies. I think it's right around the world. You get any Wednesday, whether you're in Africa or America, they're doing the Bible study. And it was life-changing for me because I never found a lot of Bible study in the Catholic Church. We read the Gospels, but not too much else. And we kind of really learned out of our Catholic school books, like our catechism and our school books more than God's Word. So I have 4 kids, all believers, 23 to 31. They all love God. They love their country. Their faith is first. And I'm so thankful for that because that's always been my biggest prayer. I have a husband that believes. But I've had to go, I teach CCD for 20 years at my school, but I have to teach a lot from the Bible or other materials. Like I don't just teach from, the Catholic materials. Our schools are closing. Our Catholic schools are closing. Our churches are combining. Now we just combine 3 churches into one.
So, Barbara, it seems to me that the question is coming. I just need to prompt you to get to it just because we're getting close to the top of the hour. But your question has to do with Catholic education?
Well, and your future of the Catholic Church in this country. It seems that the bishops are happily presiding over the closing of churches, combining churches.
I gotcha. Okay, so that makes sense. Right, we're hurting as a Catholic community in many ways. In some ways, I'm sure there are bishops in many places who are presiding over a church that is bit by bit failing, maybe in their local place. So how do you see the future of the Catholic Church, Jared?
Well, I think Barbara points to some important points here, insofar as really we need to go back to the sources, right? I mean, we need daily contact with Christ and prayer. We need to read and pray over God's word and Lectio Divina. We need to do this as a family, and parents are the primary. I don't want to say educators. I want to say mentors in the faith, right? Because we can't simply teach about God. Right, we have to help our children to truly encounter God and to live with God every day. Parents, by far, are the best at doing that. I point a lot of people to Christian Smith with his co-author's book, Young Catholic America. Right, he's a sociologist out of Notre Dame, and he says that through his studies with his colleagues, they cannot report any measurable effect of attending Catholic schools or Catholic youth ministry programs on living out the faith as adults. Right? And other people say, well, actually, Catholic schools do have an impact. I don't want to totally deny that there's any impact there, but he says this is how we see the impact. That there is adult mentorship in the faith that primarily comes through the role of parents, that is then supported by the Catholic school or youth ministry programs. They're secondary. Parents can't say, well, I'm taking my kid to Catholic school or to the church program, whether it's religious ed or youth ministry, and they'll do it for me. That doesn't work. That is not an effective way of passing on the faith. Parents have to pass on the faith, and then they're supported by the school and the parish programs. Then the third thing, and this gets us to Christian culture, he said the third thing that is necessary is living out the faith in your daily life, that you have Christian friendships, that you're praying every day. All of these things are important. So we want to put those three things together. Adult mentorship that mostly happens through parents, educational programs, living out the faith as a way of life, as a Christian culture. Those are the things that need to get to go together to make disciples for the next generation.
That's a very hopeful message, but it also gives me a slight anxiety because we hear so much from adults. No one prepared me. You know that, right. Like they're already parents. They don't feel prepared to educate their own children in the faith.
I'm working on a framework right now, with the Archdiocese of Denver for discipleship in schools. And part of this is to say we need to view every interaction we have with our students as an expression of discipleship, right? A mentorship in faith. Discipleship means teaching, literally, right? It's where the word comes from. But part of that framework is helping parents to understand their role and how to live out their role with their own kids, because I think you're absolutely right. There is like a gap here in Christian culture, as our previous caller said from Denver, right? That, we used to maybe see it in the past, but our current parents haven't been taught how to mentor their own kids in the faith. Okay, fine. Well, let's teach them how to do it. And so I think that's a big rallying call for our Catholic schools and our parishes. It even relates to my previous comment about creating family-friendly and family-centered ministry in the parish that is maybe run by families in an organic way, but also families helping other families to learn how to live out this Christian culture in the home.
I see. Yeah, families helping other families. There again, there's that power in community that in isolation, you just don't have the power to accomplish those things.
It'd be very hard just to do it by ourselves.
Jared Stout is our guest. The book is a brand new book. It's called Restoring Humanity, Essays on the Evangelization of Culture. You can get it wherever good books are sold. Anywhere, just type it in on the internet. You'll find it. Restoring Humanity, Essays on the Evangelization of Culture. The fundamental premise being we're losing our humanity, or in some cases it seems to have been lost. I don't know exactly which tense to use there, but and this is almost undeniable when you look around at the fact that we're just falling apart at the seams. Everywhere you turn, we're falling apart at the seams. This is not a book designed just to complain about this or that. It's designed to get at the root of what actually makes culture. And at the root, really, Christ makes culture.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, what is our confidence for the future? It's our confidence in Christ, that if we truly have a strong faith and we live with Christ, we will rebuild. And he will restore our humanity. At the very beginning of the book, I quote the beautiful line from the book of Revelation, "Behold, I make all things new." And that's not just at the end of time. Christ is making all things new right now. And I can think of my own conversion as a 13-year-old kid. What did Christ want to do for me? Restore my reason, my ability to think about things rightly. He wanted to restore my imagination, kind of unplugging from the things that were corrupting my imagination at the time, right? Restore my relationships, and really give me a sense of vocation and mission. That's why I'm here talking to you right now. It's because I met Christ when I was 13 years old at the Mass, in the Eucharist. I met Christ, and he began restoring my life. I'm not a saint at this point, but insofar as I am living with Christ, he is remaking me from the inside out. But that includes everything that I do. That's what I really want to communicate. It has to. My leisure, entertainment, relationships, work, All of this has to be marked by Christ for me to truly be his disciple.
I think we just should have Jared Stout on every Friday. Then we'll just go into the weekend fired up and ready to live with Christ and share Christ with others. Jared Stout, thanks.
Amen.
I really appreciate the hour. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And I am not joking. This is the book for our moment. I hope you'll get it. Restoring Humanity. You can find it. The author is Jared Stout. He's been our guest this hour, and you can find it wherever you get your books. Restoring Humanity. Essays. Wait a second. Essays in evangelizing.
On the evangelization of culture.
Oh, on the evangelization. Gosh, so messed up there. Right at the end, I was doing so good. All right, Tim Staples is coming up, and it's an entire hour for kids. If you're a kid, this hour is for you. You got to get permission to dial the phone. Maybe charge up the phone. Make sure you got a full charge so you can wait on the line until Tim gets to you. Sometimes it takes a little while with Tim. Right back with Open Forum for Kids right after this. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, where it is Kids Open Forum, but we pulled the old switcheroo on you. That's right, the old switcheroo. This hour I said was going to be Tim with us this hour, but I was incorrect about that, and it's Jimmy Akin, our good friend Jimmy Akin, here to answer questions for kids. If you're a kid, if you're under 18, we'd love to take your call. Any question at all is welcome. You got to just have permission to dial the phone, and the number is 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Jimmy, thank you so much for being with us here to do this hour.
Hey, no problem. My pleasure. Always happy to help out.
I have heard that you were a kid once. Is this true?
Well, I was a time tot, yes. So, yeah, I was a kid once.
What's a time tot?
Oh, someone who goes to the academy and bareback rides vortisaurs and things like that.
This is a Doctor Who reference, I'm assuming.
Yes, it is.
Okay,
yes.
All right. Do you have celery on you anywhere, or
not at the moment? Maybe in the future.
Did you ever call a radio show when you were a kid?
I don't recall ever doing that. I mean, in my teenage years, I called in requests for music, but we didn't have Catholic radio or even talk radio in the town where I grew up, at least not that I listened to. It was all music stations.
All right, well, we got a bunch of kids that have dialed and are getting ready to talk with you right now. Thomas is getting them on the line for us. 888-318-7884, the number, 888-318-7884. What about if a kid calls up and says, I've got some pictures of me with fairies? Do you believe that it's true that there are fairies in the world?
I would be very interested in seeing such photos. I have seen them before. Because in 1917, there were a pair of young girls in England in a place called Cottingley who claimed to take pictures of themselves with fairies. And a lot of people were very convinced by it, including the creator of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And you must be psychic, because I just today happened to release an episode of Mysterious World about the Cottingley fairies.
I am psychic. I'm about as psychic as those fairies were. No, I'm not. No, I mean, I don't want to give away anything, but I'm not currently believing in fairies. But I suppose anything's possible. But Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, it's all over the internet, and you can find it on your internet in your home as long as you are connected to a router or some other device that gets you on the World Wide Web. Just type in Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and you can get today's episode on the Cottingley. Is that right?
Cottingley fairies.
Cottingley fairies. Our number here, 888-318-7884. We are ready to go to the phones. Jimmy, you ready to take a call?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I should say again, it's just so in case anyone's just joining us now, it's Kids Open Forum. So it's an open forum, but you got to be under 18 to call. 888-318-7884. Let's start with Hallie. Let me see. Are you there? Did I get that right, Hallie? Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah.
And Hallie, how old are you?
I'm 11.
Well, thank you, Hallie, for being our first caller today. What is your question for Mr. Akin?
I wanted to ask about the time when Jesus visited Martha and Mary, and Martha was doing the work, and Jesus admonished her when she asked Mary to help her. But I also think that what Martha was doing was important because she was serving, and Jesus said that it's important to serve others. So how should I interpret that?
Okay. For folks who may want to look this passage up in their Bibles, this is found in the Gospel of Luke. There's another famous passage about Mary and Martha that's found in John's Gospel that deals with their brother Lazarus. But the one that you're talking about is the one in Luke. And by the way, gold star for using the word admonish correctly in a sentence. That's awesome.
Good work, Hallie.
In terms of how to interpret it, you're right. Jesus does talk about serving others as being important, and showing hospitality to guests, as Martha was doing, is an important thing to do. And so it was a good thing to do. On the other hand, Jesus does indicate that what Mary was doing by listening to his word, the word of God, that was even better. Now, obviously, they're both good things. Jesus says one is better than the other. but they both have a place in our lives. And so Jesus doesn't want us simply listening to sermons all the time. He recognizes there is a place for eating, and there is a place for providing hospitality to others so they can have something to eat. That is a good and important thing, and it has a place in our lives. He was the one, after all things were made through Jesus. So he designed us so that we need to eat. And obviously he wants us to eat. He wants us to show hospitality to others. And so I think the way to reconcile these two things is by saying there's a time and a place for everything. There is a time when what Martha was doing would be the most appropriate thing, like maybe after Jesus finishes preaching. After Jesus finishes preaching, everybody can eat. And maybe Mary can help Martha at that time. But for the moment, while they have the opportunity to listen to Jesus hearing a sermon, Jesus preaching, that's the most important thing right now. And I think I'd agree with that. If I had the opportunity to hear Jesus preach right now, I would be all over that. I would wait to eat. I wouldn't worry about eating right now, even if it means fasting. I want to hear Jesus's sermon. And then afterwards, well, then we can all eat. And so that's how I'd look at it. It's not that he's saying one is not important. It's just he's focusing attention on what's important right now, and later we can take care of the other important things.
Okay, Hallie?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. What a great call to start with. I really appreciate that. Our number here is 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin is our guest, and it's Kids Open Forum. Up next is Maxine in Virginia. Maxine, are you there with us?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Maxine. How old are you?
I am 13 years old.
Well, thank you for your call, Maxine. Your question for Mr. Akin.
Hello. I have a question on the interpretation of certain Bible stories, such as Jonah and the whale or David and Goliath. I'm asking whether we're meant to take a literal interpretation, or is there another meaning that the Catholic Church is teaching us through these
Well, the Catholic Church doesn't have an official teaching on exactly how we're to take Bible passages, at least not most of the time. It generally leaves that up to Bible scholars to try to figure out, provided they interpret them in a way that's consistent with the Catholic faith. So they're not denying any church teachings. As long as you're not denying a church teaching, there's a lot of openness to how you interpret stories like Jonah and the whale or David and Goliath or anything else. Having said that, one of the things that Bible scholars have done is they have noticed that not everything in the Bible is written in the same way. Some things are written as poetry. That's like the Psalms. Other things are written with symbols like prophecy. Prophecy often uses symbols. And some things are straightforward history, like what we read in the Gospels for the most part. But then there are other passages that are symbolic stories, like, and we call those parables. And Jesus used parables, and the Gospels tell us many of the parables that he taught people. And so what some Bible scholars have proposed with Jonah is that Jonah is a kind of parable, maybe. It may be a parable. It may be a parable that's based on a historical event, or it may be a straightforward historical account. So the church really doesn't have an interpretation on that. It's open to a range of possibilities. The same thing is true of the material regarding David and Goliath. The church doesn't have a teaching on this, but it is found in a book that namely the book of Samuel. It was originally just one book, although it's two books now. It is in a book that is mostly history. So Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, that's a historical book. And so we wouldn't expect David and Goliath to be a parable, because it's right there in a historical book and it's not set off in any way that would suggest it was a parable. So beyond that question, there are special additional meanings regardless of whether these are fully literal accounts or something else, there are additional meanings that we can learn from them. One of the things that we can learn from the story of Jonah and the whale is don't try to run away from a mission that God has for you. If God really wants you to do something, then you need to do it. Also, there's a special reference to Christ in the spiritual meaning of Jonah and the whale, because Jesus says, just as Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days, so he, Jesus, the Son of Man, will be in the belly of the earth for 3 days. And so it prefigures or points to Jesus's time when he was dead in the tomb awaiting his resurrection. Similarly, we can learn lessons from David and Goliath. Like, even if you think that you can't do something, because Goliath was much stronger and more powerful than David, if God is on your side, if you're really doing God's will, you can do things that are amazing. And so if you are focused on God's will and you know that you're doing what God wants, God can enable you to do it, even if it seems really hard.
Maxine, thank you very much for that call. It's Kids Open Forum today. If you're under 18, today is the day to ask any question that you've got of our guest, Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. The number is 888-318-7884, and we're going to go right back to your calls shortly. We've got dozens of great resources available right now on sale at shop.catholic.com. It's our $5 and $10 sale on books, CDs, and DVDs. All you do is head to shop.catholic.com and look for the $5 and $10 category to get your deals.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Hey Alexa, how many ways can I get EWTN?
You can get EWTN on television, via cable and satellite, on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Google Play. You can get EWTN radio in your car on Sirius XM Channel 130 and on the go on any mobile device with the EWTN app. And here's the best news. Now you can get EWTN's great programming on Me.
Kids at the start of the show this hour, and if you're a kid, we'd love to take your call, 888-318-7884. Robert in Connecticut, you are up next. Robert, are you there with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Robert. How old are you?
I just turned 12.
Congratulations. I hope you had a good birthday. What is your question for Mr. Akin?
Okay, did the Big Bang actually happen? Because the Bible says that God created the world, and other resources say that the Big Bang made the world. So did God create the Big Bang which made the world, or what happened? How did that work?
Okay. Well, one of the great things about being Catholic is we're open to evidence from all kinds of sources. And so we're open to evidence that comes to us from sources like the Bible, and we're open to evidence that comes to us from sources like science. And so it's not a question of picking one or the other. It's both and. So we look both at the information that Scripture gives us, and we look at the information that science gives us. Now, in terms of the information the Bible gives us, it does indeed indicate that God made the world. That's absolutely true. But the Bible doesn't give us the details of exactly how God made the world. One of the things that you find when you look at Genesis chapter 1, which deals with aspects of how God made things, is it contains some symbols. And so it's not meant to be a scientific account. So the church would say that Genesis 1 and its 6 days of creation, that conveys, it teaches us what God really did but in a symbolic way where it pictures it as if it just happens over 6 days in the course of a Hebrew week, because they had weeks back in ancient Israel. And so it pictures it that way because that's something that people back then were familiar with. And there are various clues in the text that show us that. But the church would say, if you want to know what happened from a scientific point of view, then you need to look at the evidence that comes to us from science. And one of the things you find when you study science is that it's never for 100% certain. Even when we get lots of scientific evidence for an idea, scientists will admit we could be wrong, we could get more evidence in the future, but we can tell you what the evidence suggests right now. And in terms of what the scientific evidence suggests right now, it does point to something like the Big Bang. And that's actually something that's been known for a while. Even before the 20th century, there was evidence that, and not a lot of people know this, even a lot of adults don't know this. So I'm going to tell you something really cool here, Robert. There was evidence that the universe had a beginning even before modern astronomy began. And the evidence is something you can go outside and see every single night. Because if you go outside and you look up at the night sky, Cy Kellett, what's the first thing you notice about the sky that's different at night than in the day?
The sun's not there.
And as a result of the sun not being there, the sky is...
Oh, it's clear. I can see the stars. Oh, it's
well,
dark.
It's dark.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. That's an interesting way of looking at the world side. Most people don't think, oh, the sky is clear. They
Maybe
think
you
the
should
sky is
ask
dark.
Robert. I don't know if I'm competent to answer these difficult science questions.
Well, one of the things that an astronomer pointed out a few hundred years ago, his name was Olbers. That was his last name, Olbers. He pointed out that if the universe did not have a beginning, then it would be infinitely old. But since we're surrounded by stars, if the universe was infinitely old, the light from all those very distant stars would have filled up the entire sky, and the night sky would be blazing with light, and it's not. The fact that the sky is dark and that we're surrounded by stars means that the universe can't have always existed. It had to come into existence at some point so that some of the light from the stars has not yet reached us. And because that light hasn't reached us, that's why the sky is dark.
That guy was smart.
Yeah, so this was called Olbers' paradox, and not even most adults know about this. But in the 20th century, so we had evidence just from the fact the sky is dark that the universe had a beginning. The question is what kind of beginning it had. And in the 20th century, there were some astronomers with names like Vesto Slipher and Edwin Hubble, who looked at light coming to us from distant galaxies, and they could use that light to measure how fast those galaxies are moving. And what they found is that it looks like almost all of the galaxies out there are moving away from us. And the farther away the galaxy is, the faster it's moving away from us. It's like the whole universe is expanding. And that means you could run that process backwards to figure out what the early universe was like. And so a Belgian priest, he was from the nation of Belgium. His name was Father George Lemaitre. He suggested, well, let's take the process that we see of the universe expanding, let's run it backwards and see what would happen. And what you would have happen is originally the whole universe would have been much smaller, and it would have been in a hot, dense state that then began expanding, and later that became called the Big Bang. And so right now, the scientific evidence suggests that the Big Bang really did happen. That's not a church teaching because it's a matter of science, not a matter of doctrine. But the scientific evidence does point to there being a Big Bang, at least right now. And since we know from Scripture that God is the one who created the universe, that would tell us, okay, both of those things are true. God created the universe, and the Big Bang looks like part of how he did it.
Robert, I wish Jimmy would have asked you questions. I think you'd have done better on the difference between night and day than I did. But does that all make sense to you?
Yeah, I once read a book that said something like nothing about God, just some weird chain reaction or something that started the Big Bang. Like
Okay.
Sometimes you will read books where people only talk about the science part and they don't talk about the scripture part. And that's often the case. If you're looking at a science book, it'll just mention the science, because the job of a science book is not to also teach you about the faith. But as a Catholic, we need to put both things together. We need to put our faith together with the evidence from science, and between the two of them, we get a better picture of everything that's going on.
Robert, thank you very much for your call. It's Kids Open Forum this hour. Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, is our guest. Our phone number is 888-318-7884. Up next is Evelyn in Utah. Evelyn, are you there with us?
Hi, yeah.
Hi, Evelyn. How old are you?
I'm 13.
Well, thank you for your call. Your question for Mr. Akin.
My question is, did Blessed Virgin Mary actually die, or did Jesus bring her body and soul to heaven before she died?
We don't know the answer to this question for sure. The Church does not have a teaching on this. It is possible that the Virgin Mary was assumed into heaven before she died, and we know of some other people that happened to, like the prophet Elijah. On the other hand, it's also possible that what happened to Mary was like what happened to Jesus, that he first died and then rose and then went up to heaven. And it's possible that Mary could have died and then rose and then was taken body and soul to heaven. And in fact, that's the most common opinion among theologians, among people who study God's word. The most common opinion is that she did die, and then afterwards she was taken to heaven. So it was like what happened to Jesus, because she was his mother, and some theologians have said, well, she would therefore, it would be appropriate for her to experience the same kinds of things that her son did. And she may have even wanted to experience things the way her son did. So she may have even wanted to pass through death before going to heaven, just like her son had. In any event, the Church doesn't have a teaching on that, but that is a very highly respected opinion. And among the people who held that opinion was St. John Paul II. If you read his writings, he says, we don't have a teaching on this, but he says this is his opinion that Mary did die.
How's that, Evelyn, make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Up next is Maddie in Nebraska. But Maddie is feeling shy to talk on the phone, so we'll see if Maddie wants to talk with us. Maddie, is that you or is that your mom on the phone?
It's still Mom.
Hello, Mom. Thank you for speaking for Maddie. We understand shyness, and shy kids are welcome, as well as every other. So what question did Maddie have for Jimmy?
Oh, thank you. Maddie wanted to know, what language did Adam and Eve speak?
Well, this is a really great question, and I don't have long to answer it, so I may have to answer part of it on the other side of the break. The basic answer is we're not sure. We don't know for sure. For a long time in history, people thought it might have been Hebrew, because that's the language that the Old Testament is written in, and so that's the language we read in Genesis, where it talks about Adam and Eve. But more recently, as people have studied the matter, they found out that Hebrew doesn't go back that far. It goes back a ways in history, but it doesn't go all the way back to the human race. So they must have been speaking some other language. And exactly what that was, we don't know. One possibility is that it was a language that modern scholars call Proto-World. Proto-World is a language that is the first one that humans came up with, and it's many thousands of years old. Nobody speaks it anymore, but scholars who study language have concluded there must have been some first human language, and if Adam and Eve were the first human beings, they may have spoken Proto-World. There is one scholar whose book I've read, his name is Merritt Rulin, and he claims that by comparing the different languages that do exist today, we can even maybe figure out what some of the words in Proto-World were. Proto-world would mean first world, so this is the first world language. And he suggests that that we can even figure out the words for water, which would be qua, or finger, which would be tik, or brother or mother or father in Proto-world. So we don't know for sure, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
Thank you, Maddie's mom, and thank you, Maddie. It's Kids Open Forum, 888-318-7884. The number, if you're under 18, your call is and question are welcome, 888-318-7884.
Your number one source for Catholic apologetics and evangelization, Catholic Answers Live.
Have you subscribed to the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter? This is Catholic Answers Live host Cy Kellett, and I want to tell you about our new weekly newsletter full of behind-the-scenes information and facts you need to know about the show. It's easy to sign up. Just visit CatholicAnswersLive.com and look for the newsletter sign-up box on the front of the page. It's a great way to keep up to date with what's happening with the show and see what's coming in the days ahead, delivered weekly into your inbox. Sign up today for the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter and see what you've been missing. Go to CatholicAnswersLive.com.
Everybody's favorite Catholic outer space delivery pilots returned for their greatest adventure yet in the brand new graphic novel Weapons of War. Fresh from saving the solar system in The Truth Is Out There and saving the timeline of salvation history in The Big Picture, Brendan and Irk land in a magnificent domed city on Mars for what is supposed to be a simple shuttle job. But soon they find themselves caught up in a sinister assault on faith and freedom. Will Mars be lost to the enemy? Brendan and Irk's only hope for the flight is in the power of God's sacramental gifts. A totally new kind of Catholic resource for apologetics and evangelization, The Truth Is Out There series combines the visual excitement and quirky humor of graphic novels with solid popular philosophy and theology. The result is a series in which everyone from teens to adults can find accessible answers to questions about God, the soul, true happiness, and much more. Order your copy of Weapons of War today by calling 844-239-4952, by visiting shop.catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
I'm Gloria Purvis.
I'm Monsignor Charles Pope. And I'm Deacon Harold. The Morning Glory team discusses COVID precautions at Mass.
Monday morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Doing the show in English today, not in Proto-World. Maybe we'll do a Proto-World day sometime. We're going to have to work on our Proto-World skills, though. 888-318-7884 is the number. It's Kids Open Forum, and any kid is welcome to call, whether you're Catholic or not, whether you're Christian or not. As long as you got permission to dial that phone and talk to Jimmy Akin, you are welcome to call. 888-318-7884. Up first, this segment is Eris. Let me just see. Eris, are you there with us?
Yes.
Oh, hi. You don't sound like a kid, Eris.
This is Mom.
Hi, Mom.
This is Mom. She's right next to me.
Does she want to ask the question, or did you want to do it?
She can do it.
Okay. How old are you, Eris?
Daddy?
Wait, I missed.
Why didn't Jesus say, "Mother, behold your son, son, behold your mother"?
Okay, so why did Jesus say, "Son, behold your mother, mother, behold your son"? This is something that happens when Jesus is on the cross, and it's in John's Gospel. And Jesus is dying at this point, and he knows that even though he's going to come back to life when he's resurrected, he's not going to stay on earth. He's going to go to heaven. And so he won't be around to take care of his mother anymore. And by this point, Mary didn't have other people to take care of her. She didn't have other children, and it looks like she was a widow, so Joseph was no longer alive. And so Jesus had been taking care of her, and now he's not going to be able to take care of her anymore in person because he's going to be in heaven. And so he wants someone else to take care of her. And there's one of his disciples who he really loved. We call that disciple the beloved disciple, who's there at the time he's being crucified. And so even though he's Mary's real son and he's the one who's been taking care of her, he now asks and tells the beloved disciple to be Mary's new son. So even though he's not really her son, he's going to be like a son to her. And so he'll do the things a son would do by taking care of Mary. And Mary also will now regard him as like her stepson or her unofficial son. So he's creating a relationship between the disciple and his mother so that they will be like a mother and a son, and the disciple will take care of his mother after Jesus goes to heaven. And that's a great question, and you get a golden apple for asking that question.
A little Greek mythology reference. Eris, you did a really good job. Thank you for asking that question. And if you would, please tell your mom she did a really good job too. 888-318-7884, our number here. Jimmy Akin, senior apologist at Catholic Answers, is our guest. And if you are under 18, this is your chance to ask any question you've got about God, about the sacraments, about the church, about maybe you have a question about right and wrong. They're all welcome. You are welcome to call 888-318-7884. Up next is Christopher in Tacoma, Washington. Let me get to you. Hang on, Christopher. Christopher, are you there with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Hello, Christopher. How old are you?
9.
Well, thank you very much for your call, Christopher. Your question for Mr. Akin. Go ahead, Christopher. Take your time.
Did God create all animals before humans, or did he continue working after humans were made?
Well, this is another question where we can look both at the evidence from the Bible and the evidence from science. In the Bible, it does show us, if you read Genesis 1, it does show us that God made the animals before he made man. Even though the days of the week of creation, the church says they're symbolic, they're not literal, nevertheless, they show us what the Creator did. And on day 5, God makes the birds and the fish. And then on day 6, he makes the land animals, and then he makes man. So the evidence there from the Bible would suggest that God made the animals before man. Not necessarily in that exact order, but that's what it suggests. Then when we look at the evidence from science, it says basically the same thing, that it looks like all of the animals we have today existed in some form before man did. So it looks like even if they're not quite like the animals we have now, they existed in some form before humans came along. Now, they have changed since humans came along, so God has continued working, not in terms of coming up with totally new animals, but in terms of tweaking and adjusting them in little ways through a process that scientists call evolution. And also, because God lets us rule over the animals, he's given us a role in how animals and plants get adjusted. And so, for example, that's where we got dogs. Originally, we didn't have dogs. We had wolves. But wolves are basically kind of early dogs. And so wolves started hanging around human beings, and we started taking them into our households, and we started breeding them so they would be even more friendly to humans, because wolves are not always friendly to humans. But we bred them so that they became more friendly to humans, and that's how we got dogs. And it's part of God's ongoing work of creation. And in this case, like with dogs, and it's true also of horses and sheep and cats and all of the different plants that farmers grow, God let us, as working for him, help guide and develop all of these animals and plants as part of his ongoing work of creation. And that's a really cool thing that God would let us do that. Don't you think so, Christopher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was a really good question, Christopher. Thank you for calling. Will you call again sometime, maybe with another question?
Yep. Thank you for answering. Bye.
What a gentleman you are, Christopher. Great talking with you. Bye. We'll go now to Michael in Tennessee. Let's see. Michael, are you there with us? Hi, Michael.
Hi.
How old are you, Michael?
I'm 9.
You're 9. Okay, sorry, I interrupted your question there. Go ahead with your question for Mr. Aiken.
Why is it bad to grumble, and how do I fix it?
Why is it bad to grumble, and how do I fix it?
Okay. Well, so grumbling there are a couple different kinds of grumbling. One kind of grumbling is where you just don't talk very loud, and so you just kind of mutter under your breath, and it's hard for people to hear. And that's why it's bad to grumble in that way, because it's hard for people to hear what you're saying. And, if you have something to say, you should say it loud enough. You don't want to shout, but you want to say it loud enough that people have an easy time understanding you, because you want to care about other people. You want to make it easy for them to hear what you have to say instead of hard to hear what you have to say. You wouldn't like it if other people are just kind of grumbling around you and you can't tell what they're saying. You would want them to speak up. And so Jesus taught us the golden rule. If you want something done for you, you should do it for other people. So if you're not talking loud enough, the way to fix it is to speak up. But then there's another kind of grumbling. Another kind of grumbling is where you complain about things. Now, sometimes it's okay to complain about things when complaining can help. But other times, complaining about things will not help. It will only annoy people. It may make them feel bad, and it may actually make things worse. And so as you grow, you need to think about, will complaining help right now, or will it not help right now? And if it won't help right now, then don't complain. Don't grumble about it, because it's not going to help. It's only going to make you feel bad. It's going to make other people feel bad, and it may even make things worse. So the key to fixing that kind of grumbling is to think, will saying this help now, or will it not help? And if it won't help, then don't say it. A lot of moms give their kids advice. I know my mom gave me this advice. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Or if you put a little different spin on it, if you can't say something helpful, don't say anything at all, because it's better to just be quiet than to be unhelpful to people. So that's the real key. Once again, it's like Jesus's golden rule. If you want something done for you, you should do it for other people. So if you want people to say helpful things to you, you want to say helpful things to them. And if you don't want people to say unhelpful things to you, then don't say unhelpful things to them. And it's just a question as you grow of figuring out, well, will this be helpful or not?
Okay, Michael?
Thank you.
Thank you.
How do I fix them?
Wait,
What did you say?
Well,
You
how do I fix it? Okay, yeah.
You fix it by thinking first. Think before you talk. And ask yourself the question. You have something you're thinking about saying. Ask yourself the question, will it help or will it not help? If it will help, then go ahead and say it. If it won't help, then don't say it. But the way to fix it is by thinking before you talk and asking, will this help or not?
Michael, thank you very much for the call. I really appreciate it. I think a lot of us needed to hear that advice about grumbling, so you helped a lot of people with your question. We have to take a quick break. He did, didn't he, Nick? Didn't he? Yeah, you feel like a better person now, don't you? All right, we'll be right back with more calls, but we can take one or two more. I think we got enough time if one or two more want to dial 888-318-7884. It's Kids Open Forum. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Right back after this.
This is Bishop Chad Zielinski from the Diocese of Fairbanks of Northern Alaska, and you are listening to Catholic Answers Live.
A lot of people think that street evangelization involves yelling out of a bullhorn telling people that they're going to hell. Not so with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Our methods are non-confrontational and effective. We simply offer information on the Catholic faith along with rosaries, miraculous medals, and prayer. Pope Francis wrote about how beautiful it is to see street preachers joyfully bringing Jesus to every corner of the earth. Street evangelization is fun and fruitful. Join us today at streetevangelization.com.
He was a doctor of the Church and one of the most famous saints of all time.
Matthew Bunson and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Augustine is honored for his immense contributions to theology, but he balanced his genius with humility. He once declared, "It was pride that changed angels into devils. It is humility that makes men as angels." He died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. What a fun Friday afternoon. Getting to talk to kids from all around the country who have questions for our senior apologist here, Jimmy Akin. Questions, if you're under 18, it's a Kids Open Forum, and questions on anything are welcome. Up next, Andrew in Nebraska. Let me get to you, Andrew. Andrew, are you there with us?
Yeah.
Hello, Andrew. How old are you?
I am 13.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much for your call. What is your question for Mr. Akin?
My question is in the second reading for this Sunday, in Romans 8:28 through 30, there is a phrase that I do not understand.
Okay.
That is, for those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Well, this is a verse that is very deep, and actually Bible scholars have debated this verse a lot. So there are a bunch of different ideas about what it may mean. It can be understood in different ways. So I can be most helpful to you. You said there was a phrase you didn't understand. There are several important words in this sentence. This is in Romans 8 for people who want to look it up. It talks about God foreknowing certain people and predestining them so that they become conformed to the image of his Son. Is there a particular part of that you want to understand more, like the foreknowing or the predestining, or is it the whole thing?
Just the whole thing.
Okay. So, like I said, there are different ways of understanding this, but I'll tell you how I tend to understand it, okay? At the beginning of the statement, it talks about those that God foreknows. And that means God knows about them and knows things about them in advance. And so the question is, what things does St. Paul have in mind here? Because God knows everything that's going to happen. He knows everything that's going to happen in the future. So when he says that God foreknew certain people, he must mean certain things about those people. And what a lot of scholars have done is said, well, what St. Paul is talking about here is the fact that some people will cooperate with God's grace. So God gives us his grace in order to be able to come to him and be Christians and be forgiven. We couldn't do that without his grace. And so he gives us the opportunity to be Christians and to come to him and to be forgiven. And he knows in advance who is going to take up that offer, who will accept his grace and his mercy. And so that's who a lot of scholars think Paul is talking about here. The ones God foreknows are the ones that God knows ahead of time will accept his mercy. So assuming that's what Paul's talking about, he then goes on to say, well, those same people, the ones that God knew would cooperate with his grace, he also predestines them. And to predestine means to set a destination ahead of time, or to set a goal ahead of time, or to set a purpose ahead of time. And so God has some destination or goal or purpose for these people. He wants them, if they're going to accept his grace, he wants certain things to happen for them. Well, what does Paul say will happen to them in this verse? He says that the destination that God has set is that they be conformed to the image of his Son. And what that means, that's just a kind of fancy way to say that they'll become like Jesus. They'll become Christ-like. They'll become loving people. They'll be healed of their sins and so forth. So they'll become like Jesus spiritually. And so that is how I tend to take this passage. St. Paul is saying, well, if someone is a person that God knows is going to cooperate with his grace and accept his mercy, then God sets a destination for that person of being made to be like Jesus spiritually, to become more holy and more loving. That's the destination God wants those people to achieve. Now, in any journey, you may or may not make it to the destination. I mean, you and your parents may set out on a car trip to go to the mall, and you may not make it to the destination. You may not make it to the mall. And so it's possible, even if you accept God's mercy, you could fall into mortal sin. So you have to be careful of that. But God wants you to achieve this destination of being made like his Son so that you become a fully loving, fully spiritual person.
Okay, Andrew?
Yep, that makes sense.
Can I ask you a question, Andrew?
Yeah?
How did you know that this is the reading for Sunday? Do you usually read the readings before Sunday?
Our family, to get dessert, we practice the verse for Sunday, the second reading.
Oh, God bless you. What'd you get for dessert? Anything good?
We sometimes get things good. It depends what Mom has.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you are prepared for Sunday now. Thanks, Andrew. Let's go to Grant now in Spokane, Washington. Grant, are you there with us?
Yeah.
Hi, Grant. How old are you? Are you thinking about it?
5.
You're 5. Okay, Grant. Go ahead and give us your question for Mr. Aiken.
Are you a baby in heaven and in earth?
It doesn't. We don't think so. We don't think you're a baby in heaven before you're a baby on earth. The church's teaching is that when your mommy and daddy have you and you're in your mommy's womb, that's when God makes your soul. And so he, as soon as you're there in your mommy's womb, even when you're just a single cell, God gives that single cell a brand new soul that he just made. And so you weren't like a baby up in heaven that then came down to become the soul of this cell. God made your soul at the same time that your parents made that one cell that then grew and developed and is you now.
Okay, Grant?
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for the call. You did a really good job.
Bye.
Bye. All right, I'm going to go to Miles now in Florida. Miles, are you there with us?
Yes.
Hi, Miles. How old are you?
8.
You're 8. Okay, thank you for your call. Is your question really hard?
Yes.
Okay.
But if the priest that blesses you does not really want to bless you, doesn't count as a full blessing?
So let me ask a question. When we're talking about blessings, we're not talking about the sacraments. We're talking about something else. So we're not talking about the Eucharist or baptism or confession. We're talking about like when a priest says God bless you and maybe says a little more of a blessing, but we're not talking about a sacrament. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, there's not a church teaching on this, but I can tell you my opinion. My opinion is that you will be blessed, as long as the priest is intending to do the blessing, even if he's not really excited about it, you will be blessed. You won't miss out on the blessing. But if he was excited and he was, wanting to do it more, then that counts as a kind of extra prayer in addition to the blessing itself. And so God might give you a little extra blessing if he is happy, but you'll still get the full blessing even if he's not particularly excited about doing it. But if he is excited about doing it, then it's kind of like a little, not only giving you the blessing, but saying a little extra prayer for you too.
Okay, Miles?
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Miles. Thank you very much for the call. I'm kind of going a little quick now because we're trying to get to everybody before we have to go. It's Kids Open Forum. Up next is Robbie in Charleston, South Carolina. Robbie, are you there with us?
Yeah.
Hi, Robbie. How old are you?
7 years old.
Well, Robbie, thank you for calling. Go right ahead with your question for Mr. Aiken.
How many disciples were there?
Jesus had many disciples. A disciple is a fancy way of saying a student or a follower, and Jesus had many followers who studied what he had to say. 12 of them are very famous because they weren't only disciples, he also made them apostles so that they would go and preach for him. And so those 12 disciples are very famous. But there were many disciples beyond them. How many there were varied from one time to another time. In the Gospels, we read about Jesus talking to as many as 5,000 people or even more at once. And so there could be thousands of disciples that Jesus was talking to, but there were 12 during his ministry that were particularly famous. And then over the course of time, after his ministry, there came to be more and more people who became Jesus's followers and who study what he has to say, and that includes all Christians. And so today there are about 2 billion Christians in the world, and so today there are 2 billion disciples on earth.
And I'm going to just leave it right there, Robbie. I hope that helped you out. We've got one more call we can try to get to. Story in Omaha. Story, are you there with us?
Story is a great name, by the way.
Hi, Story. Are you there with us?
Yes.
Okay, you got to ask your question really quick so we can get you an answer.
Okay, how many days after Adam and Eve were created did they sin?
Well, it's a very interesting question that we would love to know the answer to, but I'm afraid we really don't know. The Bible does talk about Adam and Eve being created, and then it does talk about them sinning, but it doesn't say how long after they were created they sinned. It does suggest that they sinned before they had any children. So it was before Cain was born, but we don't know how long it was before Cain was born, so we can't really tell. But it's a fun thing to think about.
Story, you did a great job getting that out quickly. Thank you very much. That allowed us to come right up to the end of the show and get everybody's question in. Thanks to all the kids who called today, all the moms and dads who parent those kids, and help them dial the phone. And a special thanks to Jimmy Akin. Thank you, Jimmy Akin, for a very fine hour.
Thank you, Cy Kellett. My pleasure.
If you want to know about what Jimmy Akin's up to right now, well, he just dropped a new Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World about fairies. The
Cottingley fairies.
Cottingley fairies. Find that at Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. This is Catholic Answers Live, and we'll do this again next time, God willing, right here.